Agnes was a lonely woman, a widower with no child. Her life had been a series of heartbreaks. Years ago, her husband had passed away suddenly, leaving her all alone in the world. She was an orphan, and her husband's family had turned against her after his death. They blamed her for his demise, accusing her of being responsible for their son's death. The accusations cut deeply, and despite her innocence, Agnes was cast aside. Her husband's family rejected her, calling her a witch. They spread rumors about her, and soon the entire village joined in. Whenever Agnes stepped outside her small home, which was the only inheritance her late parents had left her, the villagers would follow her, pointing fingers, whispering cruel words, and laughing. They mocked her, calling her names and accusing her of evil things she had never done. There goes the witch, they would say. She killed her husband. Agnes endured this torment day after day. When she went to the market to buy food, the women there would refuse to sell to her. They treated her like a disease, avoiding her as if even speaking to her would bring them harm. Some would even spit on the ground as she walked past. Humiliated and hungry, Agnes would return home in tears, wondering why her life had turned out this way. At night, she sat alone in the small house that was fallen apart. It had once been filled with love and laughter when her parents were alive. Now, it was a place of silence and sorrow. Sitting in the dim light of her oil lamp, Agnes would cry and talk to herself. What have I done to deserve this? She would ask, tears streaming down her face. What crime did I commit to face such rejection from my own people? Why do they hate me so much? Agnes tried to understand, but no answers came. The pain of being abandoned and mocked by everyone weighed heavily on her heart. She had no one to turn to, no friend to comfort her. The loneliness was unbearable. One day, after another humiliating trip to the market where the women had laughed at her and refused to sell her food, Agnes sat on her wooden chair, staring out of her window. Her heart was heavy with sadness, but a thought began to form in her mind. I cannot stay here anymore, she whispered to herself. This village is killing me slowly. If I stay, I will lose my mind. I think I need to leave. I will move far away to a place where no one knows me, a place where I can start over and find peace. Maybe then I will have a chance to live without the pain of their words and rejection. The idea gave her a small glimmer of hope. It wasn't going to be easy, but she had to try. Agnes knew she couldn't spend the rest of her life in a place where she was hated, where even her basic needs were denied. She deserved better, and even though she was alone, she would find a way to survive. With this new resolve, Agnes began to make plans to leave the village. It was the only way she could escape the torment and start a new chapter in her life. For the first time in a long while, she felt a small spark of determination in her heart. Maybe, just maybe, there was a better life waiting for her beyond the borders of her village. And so, Agnes wiped her tears and began to prepare for her journey to a place where she could finally find peace. This was only the beginning of her story. Agnes had left her village behind, hoping to escape the pain, rejection, and humiliation she had endured. She traveled far and finally settled in a new village where no one knew her past. With the little money she had saved, Agnes rented a small, shabby house and decided to start a new life. She opened a restaurant, hoping it would give her a fresh start and bring her some happiness. Agnes put her heart and soul into the restaurant. She cooked delicious meals, kept her shop clean, and waited patiently for customers. But days turned into weeks, and not a single soul walked into her shop to buy food. She would sit there from morning till night, staring at the empty chairs and tables, her heart heavy with disappointment. What is wrong with me? She often asked herself, tears welling up in her eyes. Why does no one see my shop? Am I cursed? Did I offend someone unknowingly? Why do people treat me like I don't exist? Why is my life filled with so much suffering? Every day, Agnes sat in her empty shop, questioning her existence. Her thoughts became darker with each passing day. Maybe I should just end it all, she whispered to herself one night as she sat alone in her room. Maybe I should join my husband. There's no point in living If all I feel is pain and rejection, I am tired of trying. The next day, as Agnes was walking along a narrow path on her way to fetch water, she met an old woman. The woman, dressed in tattered clothes and leaning on a wooden stick, stopped in front of her and looked into her eyes. "Stop worrying, my child," the old woman said in a raspy but calm voice. "Your suffering will soon come to an end." Agnes was startled. "Who are you? How do you know what I'm going through?" she asked, her voice trembling. The old woman smiled faintly and motioned for Agnes to follow her. Curious and desperate for answers, Agnes followed the woman to a large tree at the edge of the village. They both sat under the tree and the old woman began to speak. "I know you have been suffering," the woman said. "Your restaurant has no customers and you feel cursed, but I can help you. I can make your restaurant the most popular in the entire village. People will come from far and wide just to taste your food." But the old woman paused, looking deeply into Agnes' eyes. "You must agree to my conditions." Agnes leaned forward, her heart pounding. "I will agree to anything. I am tired of this life. I just want my restaurant to succeed. Please tell me what I must do." The old woman nodded. "Very well. Tomorrow morning, when you wake up, you will find a large smelly wound on your leg. This wound will never heal. No matter what you do every day, you must clean the wound with a small piece of white cloth. Then you must take the cloth you use to clean the wound and add it to the food you cook in your restaurant." Agnes' eyes widened in shock. "What?" she asked, unsure if she had heard correctly. The old woman continued, her voice firm. "You must do this without fail. The cloth stained with the fluid from your wound will make your food irresistible to anyone who eats it. Your restaurant will thrive and customers will flood in, spending their money and praising your cooking." But the woman's tone grew darker. "You must be very careful. No one must ever see you cleaning the wound or putting the cloth into the food. If anyone sees you, you'll be forced to confess your secret and you will die a shameful death." Agnes felt a chill run down her spine. The idea was horrifying, but the thought of finally escaping her suffering was too tempting to resist. She hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "I will do it," she said softly. "If this is what it takes to make my life better, I will do it." The old woman smiled, revealing her crooked teeth. "Good. Remember, you must always wear long clothes to cover the wound. No one must see it. If you are careful, you will live a life of prosperity. But if you are careless, your end will be terrible." Agnes nodded again, her heart racing with a mix of fear and hope. The old woman stood up and walked away, leaving Agnes alone under the tree. The next morning, Agnes woke up and immediately felt a sharp pain in her leg. She pulled up her blanket and gasped. There on her leg was a large smelly wound, just as the old woman had said. The wound oozed a yellowish fluid and smelled so bad that Agnes felt nauseous. For a moment she wanted to scream, but she remembered the old woman's warning. This was her chance to change her life, and she couldn't back out now. She cleaned the wound with a small piece of white cloth, just as the old woman had instructed, and prepared her food. She placed the cloth into the pot of soup she was cooking, her hands trembling. The thought of what she was doing made her stomach turn, but she pushed the feeling aside. When she opened her restaurant that day, something strange happened. Customers began to pour in, one after another. People who had never looked at her shop before were now lining up to buy her food. They praised her cooking, saying it was the most delicious food they had ever tasted. By the end of the day, Agnes had sold everything she had cooked and made more money than she had ever dreamed of. For the first time in years, Agnes felt a glimmer of happiness. Her restaurant was booming, just as the old woman had promised. But deep down, she knew the price of her success. She had to keep her secret safe at all costs. No one could ever know the truth. The next day, as Agnes sat in her shop preparing for another day of cooking, she suddenly felt a sharp searing pain in her leg. Wincing, she pulled up her long dress to look at the wound. The sight made her stomach churn. It was deep, foul-smelling and oozing thick pus. The pain was unbearable, but Agnes reminded herself of the old woman's words. This was the price of her success. Agnes reached for the small white cloth she had prepared, cleaned the wound carefully, and holding her breath, placed the dirty cloth into the pot of soup she was cooking. Tears ran down her face as she stirred the pot, but she kept telling herself, "It's for the best. I have no other choice." Once the food was ready, Agnes opened her shop, and as usual, customers began flooding in. The once empty shop was now the busiest place in the village. People praised her food, saying it was the most delicious they had ever eaten. Some even claimed her cooking had healing powers, making them feel stronger and healthier. Agnes' fame spread far and wide, and soon people were coming from neighboring villages just to eat at her restaurant. Agnes felt a mixture of pride and guilt. She was happy to see her business thriving, but the pain in her leg was a constant reminder of the dark secrets she carried. Every night as she lay in bed, the wound throbbed and her conscience weighed heavily on her. She often thought about the old woman's warning: "No one must ever see you cleaning the wound, or you will confess and die shamefully." Day after day, customers trooped in and out of her shop. Oblivious to the truth, Agnes wore a fake smile, serving them food while hiding her pain and fear. Her success grew, but so did her anxiety. The wound became worse, spreading and smelling so bad that even Agnes struggled to stay in her own shop. Still, she kept going, convincing herself that this was the life she had chosen. One fateful morning, as Agnes prepared to start cooking, she sat in her shop and began cleaning the wound. The pain was unbearable, and she gritted her teeth as she wiped the pus with a piece of white cloth. Suddenly, she had a gasp, startled. Agnes looked up and saw a woman standing in the doorway of her shop, staring at her in horror. "What? What are you doing?" the woman stammered, her voice shaking. Agnes froze, her heart pounding in her chest. She tried to cover her leg, but it was too late. The woman screamed, "She's putting that dirty cloth in the food we have been eating." Her voice rang out, and within moments, a crowd gathered around the shop. People pushed their way inside, demanding to know what was going on. Agnes, trembling and overwhelmed, fell to her knees. Tears streamed down her face as she began to speak. "Yes, it's true," she confessed. "I have been putting the cloth I used to clean my wound into the food, but I never wanted to do this. I was desperate. I had no one to help me. My life was filled with pain and rejection, and I didn't know where else to turn. I met an old woman who promised to help me, and she told me to do this. I thought it was my only chance to survive." The crowd stood in stunned silence, listening to Agnes' confession. Some were furious, while others felt a pang of pity for her. But before anyone could react, Agnes suddenly clutched her chest and collapsed to the ground. Her breathing stopped and her body went limp. Agnes had died right there in front of the crowd, her secret fully exposed. The villagers, still in shock, carried her lifeless body to the outskirts of the village. Following their custom, they left her in the evil forest, a place where no one dared to go unless they were burying someone who had committed a grave offense. Wild animals and vultures circled the area, ready to feast on her remains. The story of Agnes spread across the village and beyond, serving as a cautionary tale for all who heard it. The villagers learned a valuable lesson about the danger of desperation and the price of taking shortcuts to success. They realized that judging and isolating someone, as they had done to Agnes, could drive a person to make terrible choices. At the same time, Agnes' tragic end reminded everyone that deceit and dark secrets will eventually come to light, no matter how well they were hidden. Moral lessons. 1. Desperation can lead to destructive decisions. When faced with challenges, it's important to seek honest solutions rather than taking shortcuts that can lead to harm. 2. The truth always comes out. No matter how much we try to hide our wrongdoings, they will eventually be revealed. 3. Show kindness and compassion. The villagers' harsh treatment of Agnes pushed her to a life of despair and poor choices. We must be mindful of how we treat others, as our actions can deeply affect their lives. 4. Greed and selfishness have consequences. The old woman's conditions came with a heavy price, reminding us that success built on deception will never last. Thank you for watching this story. I hope it has inspired and taught you valuable lessons about life, kindness, and making the right choices. No matter how difficult things may seem, remember, honesty and compassion are always the best path to follow. See you in the next story.